OK，我们现在我们就等他电话会议开始。把声音先放小一下，因为有时候他的音乐还有版权，所以有时候YouTube 还让我把这些要删掉这部分内容。我希望我时间没有搞错，他应该是9点半，应该是现在就要开始电话会议才对。这家公司我之前做过2集视频，但是算不上特别有研究，所以我们还是同样的格式。一旦做完之后，我会讲一下我的看法，然后回答一下问题。但大家不要抱太高希望，我的回答质量不见得很高。OK，他们开始了。
If you would like to ask a question during this time, simply press star followed by the number 1 on your telephone keypad. If you would like to withdraw your question, please press star 1 again. Thank you. And again, you may now begin your conference.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our Q&A session to discuss ROBLOX's Q4 and fiscal 2021 results. With me today is ROBLOX's CEO, David Baszucki, and CFO, Mike Guthrie. Before we start, I want to remind everyone that yesterday after market close, we published a shareholder letter and earnings results on our investor relations website at ir.roblox.com. On this call, we will make some brief opening remarks and reserve the rest of the time for your questions. For webcast participants, please note the question icon at the bottom of your screen where you can type in your questions. We'll do our best to take as many as possible. On today's call, we may be making forward-looking statements, including but not limited to our expectations of our business, future financial results, and strategy. Forward-looking statements are subject to risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results to differ materially from those described in our forward-looking statements, and such risks are described in our risk factors included in our SEC filings, including our Form 10-Q filed for the fiscal quarter ended September 30th, 2021. You should not rely on our forward-looking statements as predictions of future events. We disclaim any obligation to update any forward-looking statements except as required by law. During this call, we will also discuss certain non-GAAP financial measures. Reconciliations between GAAP and non-GAAP metrics for our reported results can be found in our press release issued yesterday, as well as in our supplemental slides, copies of which can be found on our IR website. Finally, this call is being webcast, and it will be archived on our website shortly after. With that, I'll turn the call over to David.
Thank you, Anna. This is David Baszucki, and I'm joined by Mike Guthrie this morning. We'd like to welcome our ROBLOX community and our investors, both large and small. Great to be with you all today. And we're wishing you and your families all the best as hopefully we're emerging from COVID. Last year at this time, we were heavily buttoned down. Today, we have many of our ROBLOXians live in the office. We appreciate your partnership as you're joining us in our mission of bringing 1 billion people together with stability and optimism around the world. A couple quick highlights before we dive in with some additional facts that were not shared in our shareholder letter. In addition to our January user growth, our 17 through 24-year-old segment in January grew 51% year on year, which is a wonderful validation of our vision to bring people of all ages together on our platform. And internationally, in addition to strong growth in Asia Pacific, Latin America, and Europe, two countries that we have a lot of focus on, Japan and India, both grew over 100% year on year, which is wonderful for us. As we start to look at expanding the uses of Roblox, our community fund is live, and we have, as we've announced, some exciting partnerships, including with First Robotics. And we continue to do branded events and concerts almost as fast as we can go as we move towards our vision of making these types of experiences completely self-serve. And I would highlight our recent partnership both with the NFL and Zara Larsson. Over 40% of the top 100 experiences on Roblox right now are using voice, and we are working thoughtfully and carefully as we expand this rollout to our 13 and up validated users. And as always, we'll do this with safety and civility. And we have a lot of wonderful stuff in the pipeline that we can talk about today on the product side. With that, just like to highlight our core value is always safety and civility, and it's where we put our primary focus. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mike Guthrie to see if he has any opening remarks.
Thanks, Dave. I just want one addendum to something that Dave said. In addition to the high rate of growth in 17 to 24-year-olds, that age demographic did comprise 20.5% of all DAUs in January. So it's not as though it's a small segment for us. It's a large segment and it's growing quickly. As Dave also mentioned, we're basically 7 quarters into COVID. The first 4 quarters, our business grew dramatically, and we had quarters in which our top line was tripling year over year, and even in this time last year, it was 2.6x what it had been the year before. So we're obviously lapping some fairly significant growth. What we do know for sure is that we're jumping off into 22 and into a period where the hope of the world is reopening in a place where we just have never been bigger or better positioned. We are at peak users on the platform. We are at peak engagement, having been over 4.2 billion hours and over 4 billion for the first time. We have never had as many payers on the platform. And most importantly, we've never shared more of the economics with the developer community and had a stronger set of incentives for developers to build amazing content. We've never worked with more artists on the music side or brands on Roblox. And last and certainly not least, we have never had more incredibly talented product and engineering professionals in our company excited to build amazing things over the next few years. So we couldn't be more excited about jumping into 2022 and beyond, and we really look forward to taking questions this morning. And with that, I think we'll open it up.
Over to you, Audra.
Thank you. And at this time, I would like to remind everyone, in order to ask a question, please press the star followed by the number 1 on your telephone keypad. We'll go first to Mike Ng at Goldman Sachs.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much for the question. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about your view on the impact of gift cards in the quarter, particularly in December, and how that may have impacted January bookings. Thank you very much.
Hey, Mike, thanks for the question. We had a huge Q4 in gift cards. Gift cards grew incredibly quickly. What we've learned is that it's an incredible channel. It's very powerful. Getting gift cards in front of more people as they're in the physical world is a high priority for us. And we just grew at a really accelerated rate in the gift card business in December. Because it's such a great gifting item, it's certainly possible that users came into January with Robux balances. We've been doing a little bit of work inside the company trying to figure that out. I don't have enough good data to suggest that there might have been some deferred purchasing in January, so I really don't want to make that statement. We're going to continue to do some work But what you should take away from this is our prepaid card team looks at the stored value product as a really exciting one, and we're going to be putting quite a bit of resources behind growing that in 2022. Thanks.
Great. And if I could just have a quick follow-up, could you just talk a little bit about how you see the bookings growth evolving throughout 2022 and then into 2023? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I mean, yeah, we don't give formal guidance, as you know. I always look at a variety of data, but I look at our bookings charts and our DAU charts a lot. And I look at them over, like a 12-quarter period. And obviously, on an absolute basis, the business has been, really up and to the right over the last, 12 quarters and even before that. The point of that, though, is that, when I look at the growth rates that were in 2Q of 20 and 3Q of 20 and 4Q of 20, the first 4 quarters of COVID, we just had immense growth, 3 times the rate of growth in some of the quarters. Between the first quarter of 21 and the second quarter of 21, we went from 161% bookings growth to 35%. And what that really represented was comparisons. We were finally in a period where we were comparing against our early quarterly results when COVID started. You look at the data a lot to see, is that a one-time bump in our business, or are we retaining those users? Are they becoming engaged users on Roblox? And as we open things up, or as the world opens up, are they staying with us? And the answer is yes. We probably most clearly see that in payer data, where just the raw number of payers has been growing sequentially for a long time and now sits at peak levels. What we also know right now is that the big difference in bookings, separate from users and engagement, it's the big difference in the growth in bookings really has to do with the rates of growth on weekdays and weekends. So if we just look at the United States and the United Kingdom in particular, when COVID started, every day, Monday through Friday, we had super high growth because people weren't at work or at school, versus our normally high rates of growth, mostly focused on the weekends. Now we're kind of unwinding that trend. As people are going back to work, our growth rates necessarily are slowing down on the weekdays, but the weekend growth is still significant. And so that gives us confidence to say that at last, we believe that we'll be returning to the high rates of growth of a great consumer internet business. So that's what we're focused on doing. The difficult compares, really, when we look at last year, it's right after April. So it's that May-June timeframe that we talked about. And looking at that data, as you're coming down the other side, I would expect that, growth starts to accelerate. And as we look to late this year, then we're going to start getting more normalized comparisons. And that should be an indication of what we think we can do in 23 and 24. But overall, when we look at that data, we also look at a lot of other things like changes to our product, things that we're doing, and how we're investing in the business. And as a company focused on getting to 1 billion users, we're nowhere close to that. So we're quite optimistic about growth, especially as we expand the platform into other areas.
Great. Thank you very much.
We'll move next to David Karnovsky with JP Morgan.
Hi, thank you. Mike, maybe just to follow up on your prior comments as it pertains to US and UK specifically, right? Do you see January sort of representing at this point a normalized level of post-pandemic spend and engagement for weekdays, or do you expect, just a little bit more further readjustment as these regions head toward a full reopening?
David, good question. We've watched this trend for a little while. It's hard for me to peg exactly the date when we'll be, absolutely sort of back to normal. As Dave mentioned in his comments, we're in the office today. There's a big team of folks in a conference room for the first time in a long time, and so I think the world's adjusting to that. And my sense is it'll take a few more weeks and months, but in a sense, every country is a little bit different. I mean, the U.S. has had its own cadence of openings and closings and different policies, even state by state. The UK has been different than we have been. Scandinavia has always been a core, great market for us, albeit smaller from the user perspective, because people are very fluent in English. It was an early adopter of Roblox, but they had a very different approach to COVID than we have had from a policy standpoint. So it's not easy to pick the bottom. I think we'll see these kinds of trends going for a little while. And in a sense, it's such COVID is such an odd externality for businesses to deal with. I think it's possible that almost every business, 23 will be hopefully its first clean year in about 3 years, because you just had an impact of either having it, shutting things down or then reopening. And I think obviously we're still, we're all optimistic that 22 is open, we're open for business. So it's not, far away. When I look at the year-over-year numbers, I sort of peg it as somewhere between April, May, June, but that's still that's still a guess.
Okay, and then Dave, can you maybe expand a bit on some of the actions you're taking to make the platform more scalable for brands, and then for companies like Nike or Vans that are running participant experience on Roblox, be interested to know the feedback so far and how they view the platform as a channel to reach their consumers. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. Whether it's Gucci, Vans, Nike, or the NFL, the vision we have is that immersive 3D interaction is ultimately an amazing way for fans to connect with brands, possibly even more than print or image or video. And we shared some of the numbers with Gucci. I don't think we shared Nike or Vans numbers or the NFL numbers. What we can see a future where brands come to our platform, they use our Talent Hub to connect with our community. The Talent Hub is live to find partners to help build these experiences. And ultimately, the building of these experiences is very similar to building a video spot. We are working now additionally in ways for brands and artists to validate their accounts so we know it's the real brand or artist, so that they can boost traffic internally to their destination if they want. So on a single day, for example, they can use facilities on their own without a partnership with us to boost traffic to those experiences. And then finally, ways just based on our core technology to make it easier and easier for very scaled, highly complex experiences to work at super high performance on all devices, phone, tablet, and computer, where ultimately the technology we're building will be akin to video or camera, and that is more and more people can make these things very easily.
Thank you.
We'll move next to Clark Lamson at TTIG.
Hi, thanks. Good morning. I have a quick question on user growth and the impact that international mix is going to have as that sort of grows over time. I was wondering if you could help us think about how much localizing the Roblox software and developer kit has on growth. I think you guys cover a little over 40% of the world's population in their native language, and I'm curious how that's benefiting consumer onboarding, developer growth, velocity of creation, things along those lines.
I'll go first with a high-level product vision, and then I'll hand it over to Mike. We have a twofold vision. Like any other traditional software product, we want our clients, and in certain countries, Roblox Studio, to be available in the local language, and we continue to expand those languages. But the second thing is when a creator makes content on Roblox, in addition to pushing that content one time to any device, phone, tablet, computer, console, we also want that content to push automatically to multiple languages at the same time. And this is how we run right now. We continue to add languages, Japanese, for example, Russian, other languages, to make that happen automatically. And in addition, we always bring up live ops, trust, and safety as well to complement the live operations of that in multiple countries. So yes, as we add more languages, there's increased coverage, hopefully with the exact same quality we have in our native English first language. And then I'll keep it to Mike.
Clark, did that get to your question, or was there a more specific financial part to it as well?
Yeah, no, I mean, nothing specific. I guess I'm just curious if you guys have seen, as that happens, that there's, significant uptick in developer onboarding or, consumer onboarding and engagement. And it sounds like it's just kind of across the board. It's helpful.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we do look at data where we look at what we call affinity. So is there a local affinity for content in that language? And there generally is, which means to the extent that we are successful in growing a local developer community in those markets, that content will probably find a really receptive market. On the other hand, it's also been true over the years at ROBLOX that popular global content is pretty popular around the world. Localization tends to help, but some things are just universal, which is cool. But I don't think it ever hurts us to have a growing and healthy local developer community, because some of that content will just find a really receptive audience.
And just a final wrap up on the developer community, we have a recent blog post where we identify the ranking of where we see ROBLOX developers in order: United States, Brazil, Russia, Philippines, United Kingdom, Germany, Canada, Mexico, Turkey, South Korea. There's really a variety of organic creators and developers coming on from around the world.
Next, we'll move to Brian Nowak at Morgan Stanley.
Great. Thanks for taking my questions. Rather than talking year-on-years, I think it could be helpful to talk about sequentials a little bit, just given sort of the noise in the year-on-year comps. It looks like North America daily active users were down sequentially. Could you just talk about what age group is driving that, which one's declining versus not growing as quickly sequentially? And then are you seeing North America DAUs up in January versus December? And how do you think about the sequential growth of North America DAUs throughout the rest of this quarter?
Yeah, hey Brian. DAUs, in the fourth quarter, it's not unusual to have a decline. Just think a little bit like Q3 is July, August, and September. July and August is just peak for us. Like it's just an absolutely high level time of activity. September is back to school and things slow down. It's a shorter month, and then October and November are actually pretty quiet for us until late. And things pick up a little bit of a bump around Halloween. So, and then it really picks up around December, obviously, for the holidays. So Q3 has been bigger than Q4, many years. It's not really unusual. The other effect that on DAUs, on daily active users, is this frequency issue, right? The number of accounts, I don't have it off the top of my head, it's probably not down year over year. It's just the daily activity is coming down because, again, people are back to school, back to work, and it's incredibly difficult to compare with a period where everything was shut down. We've just never seen anything like that in our history. So in January, still sequentially down. Again, just frequency, especially off of the holidays. We'll see what happens overall in Q2, but the comparisons actually will also affect the sequential data.
Okay, so January is still down versus December, North America?
I'm guessing it is. I'm going to look around the table and get the data for you, and we'll come back before the end of the call.
Okay.
We'll go next to Brandon Ross at Lightshed.
Hi, thanks for the questions. I have a few. First, as we try and sort through this noise that COVID has presented, if you look at on a 2-year basis, U.S. DAU growth is, the CAGR is like 25%. Should we expect that number to be similar as we approach like real normalization going forward? Is that a good way to think about user growth on a normalized basis?
In the U.S.?
In the U.S., yeah.
I don't know specifically if 25% is the right number. What's going to happen over the next few years is that number is going to be defined much more by an older user base. So for example, right now, if I get back to Brian's earlier question, my strong sense is that 17 to 24 is actually not down sequentially. And we know the year-over-year growth rates are really substantial. So in the U.S. market, generally what you're seeing right now, and what we expect to see over the next few years, is that growth will be defined primarily by older users. And those numbers, for the user base, if they look at 13 to 16 and 17 to 24, those growth rates are pretty high right now. 9 to 12 and even U9, we have a huge user base there, but we also have a very high percentage of the population. So we've been incredibly successful. Our strategy and expectation with that market is to continue to penetrate that market, but we're getting to points where obviously additional penetrations is going to be hard to do because we have such a good foothold. And our focus would be to make sure that we don't lose that market, that we're continuing to that we continue to focus on what is in our core market. But growth is going to be driven by older users, and that will be when Dave talks about the percentage of experiences that are aged up experiences, or the percentage of experiences where we have voice, those are age verified older users. Those are the kinds of things that are going to drive growth in the United States. Now, again, you look at our numbers right now, growth is also being driven outside of the United States at pretty aggressive rates, and that's just necessary, right? We're going to be growing. We're fortunate to be growing in Asia Pacific, Latin America, parts of Europe. So overall, if I cut it into pieces, the slower growth will be core markets, U.S., the core age demographics in the U.S., under 13, high growth and aging up. And then really we should be high growth in the rest of the world for quite a while. And I'll turn it back over to David.
Yeah, I just want to highlight one other, for a long time, we were a monthly active user company, and we don't share those results, I believe, publicly. But those numbers highlight a traditional type of behavior on Roblox, especially weekend behavior, where those numbers are supported by weekend behavior. As we move to DAU behavior, and Mike has shared that, we capture usage on every day. One thing to note, a lot of the product vision that we are working on right now for Roblox, in addition to engagement, is the DAU type product behavior, spontaneous communication, voice communication, faster frequency of the product. So there are a lot of product functionality things that we're working on that in a world where MAUs were growing, we would expect DAUs to grow even faster based on that product functionality.
And then, Brandon, before your next question, sorry, I just want to respond to Brian's last question. So, Brian,
Sure.
DAUs in January are in U.S. and Canada are up sequentially in January over December. It's actually a pretty nice bump. So just to close out your prior question. So, Brandon, sorry, back to you.
Before I get to a big picture question, just kind of extrapolating from what you're saying overall, are monthly active users in the U.S. and more established markets continuing to grow despite the decline in DAU, as it's been less of a daily habit moving to the weekend?
Yeah, it probably is, although the other trend, we'll go back and look at it. It's very difficult for us to report that number and answer your question because we know we have duplicate accounts in that number. So it doesn't really do me a lot of good to give you that number if I'm not totally confident. However, what I will tell you is conversion when you look at our numbers, the conversion of DAUs to MAUs is actually growing. I think the question you're trying to get at, Brandon, would be accounts. If we looked at accounts, are accounts growing or contracting? I definitely don't have that number off the top of my head, but my guess is that number is still growing in the U.S. And again, with older users growing as quickly as they are, I'm almost positive of that. So that's the number that we should go back and take a look at. But the MAU number, because it includes all the accounts, is just a little more complicated. But we know the conversion rate is going up. So that is good. There is a frequency there. It's just a frequency compared to a period of time. I don't mean to sound like a broken record, where everybody was locked down. And so it's very, very hard to compare to a period where people weren't leaving the house and really didn't have a lot of alternatives. Yet we're still quite a bit bigger than we were then. So that's really the thing that we're working through right now.
Okay, great. And then you talked in the letter about learning a lot from the brand experimentation on the platform. And as you look at the brands that have built experiences for your platform, which ones do you believe have been the most successful experiences and why? What does it take for a brand to succeed on Roblox right now?
I would start by saying I think we love all of our children equally. I don't like to say every brand is that, we're so early. I'm going to let Jamie answer this question. It's just so early. We do love seeing the experimentation. Brands and heads of marketing all have different goals and different approaches to interaction with the user base. And anyway, I'll let Dave respond, but I think we're really in a very cool experimentation phase. So we love the fact that people are testing. One of the things that is so different is the sheer level of engagement that brands may be able to enjoy on our platform versus anything else that anyway.
Yeah, I think it's really early. I think without getting any forward-looking thoughts on future product functionality, one can imagine just as in video, advertising and brand is such a large market, one can imagine the size of that in immersive 3D. Once we start moving into 3D human co-experience, we start to see things that mirror the real world. And so when we walk through Gucci, that is an experience that is virtually visiting an installation and purchasing things. And we've actually seen some interesting trading of those items, just like in the real world following that. With Nike and Vans experience, wearing that clothing, taking your skateboard out, hanging out with your friends, something we do in the real world. With the NFL, interacting and playing with your friends around virtual football league and all of those kind of things. So they are all our children. We want to highlight right now that we are focused on the scalability, the self-serve, the elegance of the experience, and the engagement of those experiences, while reserving all of the long-term monetization. So we are more focused on DAU user engagement growth with them than trying to monetize them heavily. But we're very optimistic. There's a lot of flexibility and creativity for brands to take what they would do in the real world and mirror it in our digital world.
Thank you.
We'll go next to Matthew Thornton at Truist Securities.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Maybe just following up on the brand's commentary there, David. I guess, how far are we from seeing commerce enabled on the platform with a first step maybe being a partnership with someone like a Shopify or a comparable? I'm kind of curious. Any thoughts there? Secondly, coming back to the UCAN DAUs question, I know sequentially they've always been down historically, but I think year on year, if we back out the outage, I'm curious if you have any idea as to how much impact that had on the year-on-year comparison on the DAU, and then just relatedly there, I guess, Mike, I'm not sure if you have any data on the under 13 cohort, and particularly the 5 to 11 type demo, because obviously vaccinations really just kicked off in November there. So I'm curious if that's kind of coming into play there as well. Any thoughts there would be great. Thanks, guys.
I'll highlight that we do watch USA 9 through 12 as well as 17 through 24. We do not publish the MAU numbers, but it's pretty well known that in USA 9 through 12 on the MAU side, we're a cultural phenomenon with very high usage. There's a lot of headroom on the DAU to MAU ratio, and so when we look at future DAUs in the United States, as that ratio gets better, as the headroom ROBLOX is a utility that's used daily for a wide range of things: communication, play, learning. There's a lot of headroom on that ratio. So that is the vision of how those USA 9 through 12 DAUs can continue to grow. On the brands, there's, as you correctly note, future areas of monetization include digital shopping. One of our partners, someday, their 3D destination, in addition to a try-it-on brand experience, people will be buying from those experiences and having those items delivered to their doorstep, although we're not going to announce when and how that will work. There is obviously a full brand immersion type of advertising that we're starting to see early signals of. There's also a dynamic advertising opportunity that we'll be exploring, which includes the use of teleports to go from place to place, to launch people into individual places, includes the use of dynamic display ads that, instead of getting in front of the experience and delaying the user, are immersive and native. So the highlight here is, we've got $3 billion or whatever the right number, Mike, of cash in the bank. We're hiring a lot of amazing engineers, but we are primarily focused on safe and civil quality user engagement growth and DAU growth right now on the platform, with a lot of opportunity for gentle, increased monetization that doesn't get in front of our users long term.
Yeah, and that, sorry, go back to your second question was about US and Canada DAUs, and do I break out something, and I just didn't track.
Sorry, Mike. I guess I know they're always down sequentially, but I guess year on year, are you able to quantify what impact the outage had? And then just relatedly, if you think about the 5 to 11 demo, obviously vaccinations really just kicked off in early November there. So I'm curious if you have any data to kind of maybe talk to what kind of impact that could be having in that cohort in 4Q and as we go into 22. Thanks.
Yeah. What I can tell you on the U9 cohort is that on a global basis, it's growing quickly. And it's, hold on, give me 1 second. It's U9 right now on a global basis is just about at the average growth rate of DAUs. It's just a little underneath it. So U9 is still growing quickly. US specifically, I don't have it in front of me. I'm not sure. I'm not going to actually go through that level of detail. But now you asked about the outage. We talked in our November release. We talked a little bit about it, the 3 days and the timing. And I think we did a pretty good job of estimating it. So I go back and take a look at that. Okay. But I know for a fact in January over December, the overall U13 is growing sequentially. The year-over-year data I don't have in front of me, and I don't certainly have it with U9 versus 9 to 12. But U9 is less penetrated than 9 to 12.
And we ask that you please limit yourself to one question for the remainder of the call, just due to time constraints. We'll go next to Bernie McTernan with Needham & Company.
Great. Thanks for taking the question. Mike, I was wondering, I appreciate the breakdown between weekends and weekdays. I think that's really helpful. Is it possible to give a number for what weekends grew at in either 4Q or January for bookings?
There is not. But thank you for asking. I'm just not going to get into that.
Should I maybe flip in another one then?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I understand you want to keep the friction low for brands to experiment on the platform. What's the signal you guys are looking for, though, to know when the right time to focus on monetization really is?
With brands, when is the right time to turn on monetization?
Yeah.
I'll give you a quick overview, and I'll let Dave talk more about it. I think it's incredibly subjective. Right now, last year we had 12 great, successful brand experiences. At the beginning of this year, we started off at a higher rate. I think the metric for 2022 is the sheer number of great brands that just do something with us so that they're looking at the platform and experimenting. And as we watch what they do and how they do it and the value that they get, then I think we can start having those discussions. I think to do it otherwise would be to add a lot of friction, require long negotiations, and really slow down that part of the platform, which I think would be a real mistake. I've had conversations in the last few weeks and months with some of the developer community. Many of them are getting very, very sophisticated. These developers are really building sophisticated businesses. They're not just hiring developers, they're hiring business people. They look at the brand opportunity, they're really excited about it. The recent brand experiences are built by our community, and they're really excited about that opportunity. The economics of that is a great pairing to what they're doing on their other creations and building of gaming experiences. And so we want to let that really grow organically rather than try to cut that off and slow it down.
Yeah, and then this is Dave chiming in on what you might see, once again, without giving any date. That is a functionality on our platform that supports both brands and developers. For developers, we're seeing more and more VC-backed developers taking a bigger risk. And many of these developers, just as they do in other markets, want to initially bring people to their experience as they test, as they grow, and boost themselves. And so we have a primitive system on our platform. We are refining that so that it's much more sophisticated. That concept of boosting and really essentially paying to bring people to a destination in a nice way is very similar to a brand in a traditional TV spot where they want to make sure they get a certain number of eyeballs on their, in this case, video, but in the future in their 3D immersive experience. So you will see us working on ways for brands. If a brand wants to predictably have 5 million people in a week, for example, come to their experience, at some point, and once again, I'm not sure what the right number is, whether it's 100,000 or whatever, have a way to do that and guarantee they can bring that type of exposure.
We'll go next to Drew Crum at Stifel.
Okay, thanks. Hey guys, good morning. Several larger entities have expressed ambitions around or an intent to develop a metaverse. As you reflect on last year, did you find that this competitive push created any challenges for Roblox, including your ability to recruit and retain intellectual capital? And would you anticipate this changing in any way in 2022? Thanks.
Yeah, I'll comment on this. The metaverse concept has been around for 30 years, and this has been a consistent arc from the initial mention in Snow Crash through some products in actually the early 2000s through Roblox. We've been doing this for 16 years. We have a bunch of things that are really foundational to us, including being a 100% UGC platform, a foundation on safety and civility, and really a company based on innovation. We've seen absolutely zero friction on the recruiting side as we continue to grow and show our vision of where we're going here.
And next we'll move to Omar Dessouky at Bank of America. Omar, your line is open. You may be muted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Great, thank you. Okay, you presented a compelling feature release roadmap for the first half of 22 at your Investor Day in November, including spatial voice, UGC, 3D layered clothing, avatar heads, faces, and bodies, and facial expressions, for example. Which of your feature roadmap would you consider continuous improvement of the platform versus a step change improvement in the technology? And also, how would you think about your acquired technologies, such as Human and Gilded, in that respect?
Yeah, so a couple highlights. We presented a really wide roadmap at our Investor Day, I don't think we gave any ship dates for that, and at the same time, we're live with spatial audio, and I think the layered clothing and UGC bodies are, I can see where they are in the pipeline. I'm really excited and optimistic about that, but we would never give ship dates on anything. On our acquisitions, we tend to make two types of acquisitions. We are traditionally bringing people on board who are experts in certain fields, whether it's Loom AI, as you mentioned, some of the others that have expertise around Avatar or other types of our platforms, social with Bash. And then on the case with Gilded, this is a wonderful parallel category. I would call that the social communication platform, and there's several other well-known people in this area. We do believe there's opportunities for interoperability, for connection between these types of platforms and what we would call ROBLOX as an immersive 3D co-experience platform. So one of the things we're doing with Gilded is using that as a way to look into the way these types of platforms can connect openly. And when we do that, we will make those available to other social communication platforms.
And we have no further questions in the phone queue. I'll turn the conference over to Anna for the web questions.
Great. I think we've got time for one more from Andrew Erkowitz from Jefferies. Dave or Mike, can you discuss spending trends relative to new users versus repeat and by international versus U.S. Canada?
Sorry, spending trends?
Mm-hmm.
So say again, for new users versus
international,
Oh.
new users versus repeat,
Yeah.
international versus U.S. Canada.
Yeah. Payers tend to, over time, increase their rates of payment, and new payers always tend to be on the low end of monetization. So as we add new payers, they tend to come in low and grow over time as a cohort. Returning payers are pretty predictable as a cohort. They tend to grow really consistently for very long periods of time. So we have really high payer retention on the platform, and it's been true for forever that the new payers are diluted to the overall monetization. All the existing payers are continuing to add. International monetization, it very much tracks GDP per capita. You look at the wealth effects of countries and the spending will look very, very similar. So if you took the US as a unit of one and look at GDP per capita in the other countries, and you'll probably have a pretty good sense of where monetization is around the world.
Great. Audra, I think that wraps it up for us.
Thank you. And that does conclude today's conference. Thank you for your participation. You may now disconnect.
OK， 所以他们讲完了，就是主要的问题都是在问用户增长啊，这个可以理解。这家公司，我首先讲一下我总体的看法。我之前有2-3期视频吧讲过这家公司。我之前讲过为什么不买它的原因，有2方面，一方面是说它本身由于在把自己包装最漂亮的时候，在疫情最严重的时候，把这种受疫情影响最好的一个公司包装上市，所以一下上市就得到了市场的追捧，然后一下把市场把它的市值推得很高，所以就是从价位上来讲，就是它在我看来，我不知道今天它会跌多少，但之前所有的价格，我觉得都是很高的价格，所以不会考虑。所以这是一个。第二个就是说，这个跟 Peloton 类似，就是这样的公司，就是它明显的是受益于疫情，大家比如关在家里边，没有地方去，尤其是小孩就是有这么一个游戏的平台，当然大家用户增长然后花钱就各方面指标都很好。但是呢，我没法判断说这种比这种疯狂的增长，2年之后疫情逐渐过去，大家基本上恢复正常，比如小孩可以到外面去玩，要上学就周末可能有多点时间。那这样的情况下，它之前的增长能持续多久？ Peloton 我不清楚，这家公司我也不清楚。我总体的感觉，我的一个大概的直觉是说 Peloton 更依赖于疫情，因为这个东西是你要流汗啊，就是在那个上面跑步的那种东西。然后如果一旦你磕到外面去了，很多人就会，我的感觉就是至少不会再去，你原先已经在它这个平台上，电车平台上已经投资很大，已经非常，它的忠实用户可能不会变，但那些新的用户，你让他再去加入这样一个平台，难度就很大。但游戏呢，可能跟这不同，它可能对疫情，就是它疫情之前之后的变化可能没有那么大，但我的感觉仍然会是很大。所以这个原因导致就是说我没法对这样的公司，比如未来增长啊、利润各方面进行大致的估计，所以我就不会考虑。所以这是2个原因，我为什么不考虑？那为什么我还看这家公司呢？就是因为它总体这家公司很有意思，因为它是游戏，但它不是游戏公司。我们之前视频讲过，它建立的是个游戏的生态系统。然后里面有用户，有他的公司在管理，有自己单独的经济，有那些开发者在开发不同的东西。然后这样呢，有这么一个平台之后，很多未来的商户啊、公司啊、品牌都会利用这个平台想推销自己的产品。所以它其实你如果不考虑 Facebook 这2年的投资之外，它其实这个生态系统是最接近我心目中的那个元宇宙 Metaverse 那个概念的，所以它这个很独特的在市场有这么一个公司，而且它的管理层总体质量不错，然后看它几年下来，然后都是比较着重看长远的发展，所以从质量来讲，我不觉得管理层有多大的问题，所以还很值得我去继续关注这么一家公司。但它现在的问题是什么？我们可能看一下这张 slides，就应该比较清楚。就它现在这个季度，包括它的收入增长，其实也都还不错。我的理解是说，你如果是我之前的判断是说，我好像昨天才刚讲过这个，就是说这家公司跟别的公司疫情的结束的时间不同。别的公司可能疫情早就结束了，因为大人基本早就可以恢复行动自由了，但是他们用户是小孩，所以小孩的保护在全球都是第一位的，所以他们的疫情结束的会比较晚。比如说我们可以看到它这个每天的活跃用户在不同区域的分布，你看在美国和加拿大，从去年4季度，就是基本上就是整个去年1年从2季度开始增长就变缓，到最新的季度增长开始出现负数，欧洲增长也是逐渐趋缓，就这种发达国家就是疫情逐渐开始结束，这就体现出来了。那比如说在亚洲或其他的那些区域，那你看这个用户的增长它就没有太大的变化，就是这是跟疫情是相关联的。如果是这个趋势持续，比如再过1年肯定不到，可能2个季度之后，我估计美国的情况还是类似，然后其他包括亚洲的国家也就逐步摆脱疫情，这个增长也可能还会继续变缓，所以这是一个大家要注意的。比如说这个是同样的，在上面平台上的时间也是一样，你看美国和加拿大在过去几个季度都是负数，欧洲也出现过负数，比较大增长的都是亚洲和其他区域。这就是为什么你看它的收入虽然现在还是不错，但你看它的 booking 我们之前讲过，相当于是未来的收入，就是说用户放到觉得他将来会花的钱，他就可以先放在这个平台里，然后转换成他可以花的那个币，对不对？所以这叫 booking， 所以 booking 的下降就会比较多，所以这是大家对他最大的担心，就是像我之前讲的，就是这些用户一旦从疫情里面出来，这个增长，然后花费的时间、花费的钱都会大幅的下降。这也是为什么我估计这个管理层说，这个季度他们开始不再提供 guidance， 就是不再做每个季度的预估，因为通常多数公司都会有说，我现在跟你讲说我这个季度会下面一个季度收入怎么样，他们好像之前讲说他们不再提供这个了，所以如果市场对这个反应很负面，我可以理解，就是因为大家都是想的都比较 想的比较短视吧，就是长期看来，我对这家公司，我觉得我仍然会关注，但是短期它由于第一个估值的原因，第二个它现在这种未来几个季度会面临用户的增长、收入的巨大的压力，所以我不会应该不会考虑，所以就是这样了。然后我们今天因为我是临时决定做这个收听的这个直播，跟大家一起听他的电话会议，所以参加的人不多，没有关系，因为希望大家如果以后有问题，可以在后面的直播提出来，然后我会尽可能的解答会员的问题。然后我多做一些节目，还是同样的目的，是希望大家如果是真正想做研究，还是要形成看财报、听电话会议的习惯所以跟大家一起听一下，我觉得对我也是有好处，可以及时跟大家沟通。所以如果有问题，我们再等1分钟，看大家有没有问题。如果没有问题，我们就这样。然后今天晚上我看一下我的笔记本，今天晚上好像还有一家公司，是不是？对啊，今天晚上好像还有一家公司是在凌晨，是 The Trade Desk，也是财报，它是相当于是开盘，它是开盘之前是开盘之前，所以这种比较特别的，所以我有可能如果那个时候还有精力，我有可能会再直播那个 Trade Desk 它的同样的电话会议。那家公司也是蛮有意思，然后我也观察了好几年，一直没有买，觉得比较贵所以我们到时候看一下大家有没有问题可以到那时候再回答，好吧？所以我们现在就这样，然后我们如果大家对 Trade Desk 有兴趣，我们几个小时之后再见，2个小时之后再见。OK， 谢谢，再见。